Hello and welcome back to Meat City Gaming. JD here with another episode of Battle Bites here in World of Tanks. And today we're covering the special event that's going on for the 100-year anniversary of the use of tanks in battle. This is the Mark I tank, the Trench Warfare game mode that's been introduced to the game. It is part of the 100 Years of Glory and the Fight for the Centennial T95 event. Where you can earn a Tier 8 British premium tank. What I'm going to do in this video, though, is just focus on the tank itself and the game mode. So I'm going to go through the equipment that the Mark I tank has, and then I'll show off a couple of battles in the tank just to give you guys a feel for how this game mode works, and a couple of tips that I've picked up along the way over my first day of battling in this tank. I'm not really going to go into strategy for the event for how to earn the T95. I'm going to do that in a separate video. If I did it here, it would be a little bit too long and too convoluted, and the complaint that I get most about videos is their length. So I'll try to keep this short and to the point on the Mark I tank, a tank review of the tank, and then two quick replays in the Mark I tank so you guys get a feel for it. So this huge slab of metal is the Mark I tank. It plays just like all the other special event modes in its own battle, 7v7, only against other Mark I tanks. Everybody will have the same tank in those modes. So the tank does not have a turret. It has two guns on the side, one here, and boy, they look like they get a lot of gun traverse, but in practice, that's not the case. They shoot one bullet. When you look visually and you fire the gun, it looks like both guns fire, but they don't. One single bullet comes out of the middle of the tank, and so you're stuck to this very narrow firing arc because both guns kind of need to be pointing at the target. So you don't get to take advantage of the guns on either side kind of traversing independently to a wide range. So first we'll go into this new mode that they've kind of enabled here, where it's almost like a little armor profiler. That's a part of it. But they go through each of the separate modules. So, and it's broken down by component. So first they have the engine, and you can see the stats here for the horsepower and power to weight ratio. Those aren't really important. What matters is the top speed for the tank, and it's 35 kilometers per hour. It is a bit of a slow tank, and the reverse speed is incredibly slow at 10 kilometers per hour. Thankfully, the map is small, so it's not like you need to chug along for a long time in order to get where you're trying to go, in order to get to the action. It's tight spaces. You'll see the enemy quickly, but you can't really adapt quickly. You can't change flanks, and the terrain is really rough. So the tank gets up to speed, fairly quickly. But there's a lot of rubble and trenches and bunkers and stuff in the way. So it's not a smooth ride. You're not going to be zipping around in the battlefield. It is a bit of a sluggish tank, which is one of the main issues with the gameplay mode. So next we'll go to the gun. It is a 6-pounder. It has a really fast reload time. You can fire just once every 2 1/3 seconds, and that might come down a little bit if you have some experienced crew that you put on the tank. The aim time is pretty good at 2.3 seconds. The accuracy looks really terrible. I mean, 0.5 is bordering on KV2 land, but because the maps are so tight, it's not really a big deal. You're at fairly close range, and these tanks are huge, as you can see. So it's not too tough to hit the tank, and it's not too tough to get your shots to go where you're trying to go. So there are these huge tracks. It does not look like you can track this tank. Across all the games I've played, I have not seen the tracks on a single tank come off yet. So if you have, please let me know. I'd love to see that. If you have a clip of it or a screenshot, please send it to me, and I'll kind of try to splice it into a video or do something to highlight it, but I haven't seen it yet. So there is no turret, but we can see that the view range for the tank is 270 meters. And again, it's tight quarters. You're going to be seeing the enemy, and they're in the same tank you're in. So even if you have a fully kitted out crew that you've maxed your view range farther than theirs, it's not really practical that you're going to see the enemy before they see you. That's almost never going to happen. And again, signal range for the radio, not very important on a small map. Now we get to the ammo, and that's one of the first interesting things here. So first we have standard ammunition. It is steel shell is what they're calling it, and it has a penetration value ranging between 20 and 34. So about 26, 27, 28 is the average penetration, and then damage is about 30 average damage for the standard rounds. Then it's not a premium round. There are no premium rounds, but it's a special round. It's flamethrower fuel, and they call it gasoline. The penetration is super high, so it will just pen the enemy when you get in close. It has an extremely short range. We'll see that in some of the video. And it does a constant stream of very low damage while also setting your opponent on fire so they burn as well. So if you get in really close shotgun range and you can just lay on the flamethrower, it will put out a lot of damage very quickly. So in terms of the crew, you can use absolutely any crew in your garage to pilot this tank, and the crew XP that you get from these is incredible. So, you know, pick one that you want to work on, but is in a tank that is lacking something. You don't have Sixth Sense yet, and man, you'd really like to have it in that crew. Throw them in this for a couple of games, and you should get that skill fairly quickly. Again, I have my most experienced crew in here now just for the first couple of games, and you get a small advantage for having these extra skills, but not really, not to make it noticeable. It's not gonna be what carries the day using a more skilled crew. So now we'll take a look at the armor profile, and what a cool addition to the game that came in with the last patch. We get our own little armor profile viewer. It doesn't have anything to do with angles or changing the angle based on how you're looking at the tank or anything like that, but it does identify what sections of the tank have what kind of armor. So the first section of armor that we're going to look at is between 1 and 20 millimeters. And so anything that your gun hits here, remember the minimum penetration of the gun was 20 millimeters. If you can hit a flat surface that's shown here, you will penetrate because your min value is above the max value of the armor. So anything shooting at the side of the tank is gravy. If you are looking at the front of the tank, the gun turret in loose terms here, on the left and right, that's a good place to hit because if you're shooting at it from the front, that's going to be 20 millimeters facing you. Stick closer to the main body of the tank. There is more angling the farther out to the side you get. But if you can hit this flush, you're going to penetrate. So that is where I recommend shooting this thing from the front. If you're in a frontal engagement, aim for these gun turrets. That's your best chance of penetration. The next step up of armor goes 21 to 30, and you'll remember that this overlaps heavily with the penetration values of your gun. So if this armor was flush facing your gun, you probably have a 50-50 shot because your value overlaps so heavily with the armor value. However, it's not really a flush armor surface. Look at the angling on the lower plate and the upper plate. If you shoot those, you are not really going to penetrate 9 times out of 10 in my experience. I put about 15, 20 rounds into the lower plate of these tanks. Even when I was shooting up at it, I was down on a slope, the tank was cresting a ridge, coming over the top at me, and my shots bounced almost every single time. So all your training to shoot the lower plate as a weak point, try to train yourself not to do that right now in this special game mode because it's not really going to be successful. Same for the upper plate. It's angled, don't bother. But there is a chance to be successful with this flat slab of armor above the angled upper plate, right? That's a nice flat piece. If you can see that and if you can shoot that, you'll have a chance, a good chance, but not a guaranteed chance to go through. Again, your values do overlap and are a bit higher, I think. So if you got to shoot from the front and you don't have a gun turret to shoot at on the side, then aim for that flat upper plate. That's your chance to penetrate the vehicle. There are tiny, we'll call them gun mantlets. They're not really mantlets, but don't shoot the guns. Their armor's high enough that it's above your maximum penetration value. So if you hit right on those little oscillating turret pieces or gun pieces, you're not going to penetrate. And then we have this ridiculous 231 plus armor of the tracks. So don't try to shoot through the tracks to the flat body here that you can see behind the track. You cannot go through the tracks, and like I said before, I don't think you can even track the vehicle. So avoid the tracks, What you really want to do is shoot the flat side. From the front, you want to shoot the gun turret. And if you don't have the gun turret, you want to shoot the upper plate, which is flat face on. Two more quick notes before we get to the gameplay. One, the hit points for the tank is 200. So if you're shooting standard rounds at the tank with the 30 average damage, it's going to take about 7 rounds to kill a tank at full health if you're rolling on average. Keep that in mind. And also, in terms of the equipment you can put on the tank, it doesn't really matter. You can put whatever you want on. I loaded a premium first aid kit and a premium repair kit. You didn't really need them. I haven't lost a crew or a module in this entire mode, so I don't think they're serving any purpose. Certainly don't use them by accident and cost yourself 20,000 credits. But I did also have a premium fire extinguisher on, thinking that would lower the chance of a fire. Forget that. If you get hit with a flamethrower, you're going to be lit on fire. And the first second you get hit with that flamethrower, it's going to burn your premium extinguisher. You're going to continue to be lit on fire because of the flamethrower. So you can load a manual fire extinguisher, and if you're getting hit with a flamethrower, you kill that tank, the flamethrower stops. You can then use your manual fire extinguisher to put out the fire and prevent further burning, but do not waste a premium fire extinguisher. It will provide almost no benefit. All right, let's roll into the gameplay. So here we are in the first of 2 replays in the Mark 1 tank, and you can see here this is a custom map, and it's 7-on-7. Everybody's in the Mark 1 tank, and this is a team destruction type game mode. There is no base to capture. You must destroy all the tanks on the enemy team in order to win, and I assume normal team destruction rules would apply. If the battle went the distance, the team with the most tanks remaining would win the tiebreaker. And if the same amount of tanks are in play, it's the team that did the most damage that would win. But in my experience, that has never even come close to being true. These battles are quick, which is probably the most important thing about them, and for the Centennial T95 event, trying to earn that tank. Again, I'll get into more details in that in the next video, which focuses on that. But for the sake of this one, all you need to know is these battles are quick. It's about a 3-minute battle on average. And here you go, we can see we're in position, and this is what these battles devolve into. 2 tanks facing each other and just throwing shells at each other as fast as they can. And hopefully you're a little bit more accurate than they are. You get the first shot in. And then the other thing that can happen is you have the side of a tank that can't shoot back at you, and that's great too, because then you're just unloading into the tank and they're not able to shoot back at you. So here you can see I am shooting at that upper plate, the flat upper front plate, and I'm having a pretty good time with the success of penetration. But there I was shooting at the side of the tank. There was one that went into the upper plate, and now you can see that the limitations of this gun come into play. So I get eliminated after going head-to-head with about 3 tanks there. We did get 2 kills, had a nice little contribution to the battle, and then you can see one of my allies there was going up into shotgun range to fire off the flamethrower at the opponent's tank. So while my allies finish up the battle, I'll give you a couple more things to think about for this map. So if you look at the map, you can see the 2 bases where the enemy teams, the friendly and enemy teams start, and they're not a base that you can capture. There's no flag there, but in between the 2, there are a number of green locations highlighted on the map, and those are represented by bunkers in the game. They look like a little concrete bunker, sometimes with flames shooting out of them from like a flamethrower. Inside each of those bunkers is a power-up. You need to destroy the bunker in order to see the power-up. You can just roll over it, or you can shoot it, and then you need to roll your tank over the power-up to pick it up. Now, they promote those power-ups as being one of a number of things, either flamethrower fuel or armor repair, or there's one other one that they say it can be as well. I have never seen anything other than flamethrower fuel. I've hit most of them at this point, and every time it's flamethrower fuel, and I think you get 15 units of flamethrower fuel from the pickup. Maybe, I think they do start to respawn. If you take one early in the battle, they'll respawn throughout the battle. Maybe some of the later ones are timed to trigger, and they'll have the repair or the other premium pickups that you can get, but I haven't seen it. So far, to me, it's just been flamethrower fuel, which is fine. The flamethrower fuel is valuable when you're approaching an enemy tank, if you want to get in their face and do some damage quickly, you'll switch over to the flamethrower and use it. But you need to be really careful about that because the range on the flamethrower is super short. So if you're charging an enemy tank and he's looking at you, if he's firing regular shells and you're trying to approach to get close enough to use your flamethrower, they're probably going to get in 3 hits before you do. And you can't trigger your flamethrower early because you don't have a lot of fuel, unless you've gotten a pickup, then you can. But if you start hitting that flamethrower early, they start backing up as fast as you're approaching them, or they start backing up. They can delay the time that you get to them with that flamethrower, and they can do a ton of damage before you get to them. So it's best to use that when you kind of have the side of your enemy, you're rushing into them as they're looking at somebody else, and then you can kind of just plant your nose in the side of their tank, light up that flamethrower, and eliminate them very quickly. So that, I think, wraps up. That was the last kill there for the enemy. They won 3-0, and you can see there were 3 enemies in a platoon on the enemy team, and that's unfortunate that you can have platoons in this game mode, because the team with a platoon usually is going to win, especially if it's a 3 or 4-man platoon against a random team of pickups. They're going to clean up. So we can see from the post-game results, I did have a nice result there, 420 damage, more than anybody else in the game. And being in the top 3 damage dealers on your team is important because that is what earns you the bonus op for the Centennial T95. Again, we'll get into more details later. So one more quick gameplay, and I'll show you here the strategy that I've kind of adopted for my gameplay. So it's kind of tough because you've got these awkward tanks, right? Narrow firing arc, slow speed, no turret. There's a lot going against these tanks. What I found to do is to try and go up the middle-ish of the map, pick up 1 or 2 of the pickups, the flamethrower fuels that I can. Then don't crest the ridge. Don't expose your tank to be shot from everybody, because the first tank that gets lit up is going to have a bad day. But get into positions where you're in the center of the map, and then watch the enemy deployment. Usually, they're going to go to the sides, far to the east and far to the west, just like your allies are. And then you want to judge which side is weaker, which side you have the advantage on, and you'll be able to, once they're engaged on the flank, pop over the center ridge, and then put flanking fire into those enemies, and really help support that flank, hopefully win it, and then you'll have advantage in numbers to take out the rest of the enemy units. Remember, the tanks are all the same on both sides, so it's the team with the greater numbers that's usually going to win. If you send 5 tanks down a flank and they've got 2 defending it, push, be aggressive, because your 5 tanks should outclass their 2 tanks, and you should be able to get a win. So for this this map, I've actually gone through, and I think I got 2 separate fuel pickups. And so I'm going to do something a little crazy here. I see we have an advantage on this flank. The enemy tanks are shooting at my allies in the front. So I decided to go a little bit ridiculous here. We come down the slope, and I've got the side of these tanks. I switch over to the flamethrower fuel, and we are just laying into this guy now. And watch, it's effective, it's powerful, but it's not super fast, right? I'm just laying into this guy, and he didn't blow up quickly, and I used all but 2 of my fuel there. So I had 40 fuel from the 2 pickups and needed just about every drop of it to kill a full health tank. So depending on your loadout when you go into the game, remember the shell capacity of these is kind of limited. The default loadout is 30 regular shells and 10 flamethrower ammo. And that's what I recommend using. That sounds about right. You can finish off a wounded tank with 10 flamethrower fuel. And you need those shells, those 30 shells, because they can go pretty quickly. So keep that in mind. If you've only got 10 flamethrower fuel and you're running into a full health tank, you probably will not be able to kill it with just that amount of default flamethrower ammo. But that was a great result there. That was definitely 200 damage for the flamethrower there. We put in at least 1 more hit, I think, and we have the advantage in terms of tanks. We can see there's 1 tank in front of us here. One other thing to keep in mind, the guns are low on this tank, right? Usually you're used to having your turret and your gun on top of the turret. So, you know, as long as the top of your tank can see their tank, you'll be able to shoot it. It's not the case here. These are low. When you go into the sniper mode, your view drops down. And so that can be, you might be able to peek over a ridge and see a tank and think, oh, I can shoot it. And then when you go into your sniper mode, you see you actually can't because your guns are below the crest of the ridge. whereas the top of your treads might be peeking over, but that's not where you're shooting from, so that won't work. So once again, that was another victory. Close look, a quick look at the post-game stats. You can see I had another fairly good game, was in the top 3, was able to get a kill and win, which is how you earn a point automatically for the Centennial T95, which is the main goal for this operation. So to wrap up my closing thoughts, I do want to say major props to Wargaming. My biggest tip or complaint with these events in the past was that there was no motivation to continue to play the special event. So they probably spent all this time and effort on rolling out this really cool event, whether it was the Spectre tanks or the Tog boats or whatever. And then there was no, you played it, it was cool, you're like, oh, that was neat, that was kind of a different experience. But after doing it a couple times, am I going to do it again? Or am I going to go back to grinding my tanks, right? You don't really get silver or you don't really get XP usually from these events. Instead, it was just a novelty. You did it to experience it. And then are you really going to waste more time, or are you going to go grind your tanks that need grinding, that need advancement? Well, you're going to go grind your tanks. Thankfully, this time, they've given us a reason to go back and really enjoy the game mode. It is tied heavily to the pursuit of the T95. So there's a lot of motivation to play this tank, and they've tied it in very nicely. I'm a big fan of how they've done that. The one complaint I guess I have at this point is that the tank itself is the limitation. And I know that's the whole point. It is the celebration of the first tank, and so that's what we're going to be driving. And it is the primitive tank, so it's going to have its limitations. But it's just a little bit too brutal to drive because the map is so cluttered and so rocky with the terrain, the ups and the downs. It's slow. It has that super narrow firing arc. It's kind of a slog to play. Thankfully, the games are super quick. You can get in, get out in about 2.5, 3 minutes. So that's phenomenal. You're never stuck in it for too long. You don't have too far to travel. But I feel like they really could have fixed it if they would have gave the guns more flexibility. If you could have fired, if your cursor had the flexibility to follow either of the guns through their full traverse. So you have a gun on the left side of the tank that looks like it should be able to shoot at least straight to the front and then 90 degrees to the side. And then you have the other one on the other side. So if you could shoot 180 degrees with your gun arc, that would be much more, I think, flexible in terms of the gameplay. It'd be a lot more fun. They'd have to find some way to code it so that it would look like the leftmost gun was firing and the right one would, stop when it got pointing straight forward if you were looking to the left of the tank. So maybe those were some challenges that would have been too difficult to overcome with the engine that the game uses. But I feel like that's the biggest problem. You can't angle your armor because you have such a narrow arc. So basically this devolves to you and the enemy facing each other and just pumping out shots, and you're trying to aim for their weak point and they're trying to aim for yours, and whoever gets luckiest or gets the first shot is going to win. And then, of course, if you have the flank of somebody, you'll be able to chew them up pretty quickly. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. If you did, please feel free to give a like and subscribe for future content. I am going to start putting together now the summary and the walkthrough for how this whole event works, and some tips on how to kind of use the Mark 1 missions in conjunction with your regular tanks to maximize how many points you're earning towards the Centennial T95. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.